So hi everyone, thanks for joining the online English meetup group. So this is we had several sessions on API management previously from Samir and Venkat and also from other folks. So this is in continuation of that. And today's session we are going to deep dive into best practices for the API catalogs. So myself, I'm Rajesh Nagarajan. I lead the enterprise integration practice at Aviva. I will let Samir and Venkat introduce themselves, and then we can get started from them on. Go ahead, Samir.
Awesome. You know what? Let me just pull up the deck and we can actually get started from here. All right. Okay. All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks, Rajesh, for the intro. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's session. Really excited to talk to you about the API catalog best practices today. This is part of our overall mastering API management series that we started back in April. I'll give you a quick overview of that. Quick intro about me, Samir Parulkar, product marketing here at Salesforce, focused on MuleSoft API management product portfolio. And I'm excited that I'm joined today by Venkat. Venkat, we'll do a quick intro.
Hey, thanks, Amir. Hey, everyone. Really good to be here again. I'm Venkat. I'm product manager here in the API management team. Excited to talk to you about the catalog today.
Awesome. And also joined by Sue. Sue, do you want to? I know you just
Yeah.
can you just do a quick intro?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Sue. I'm a technical product marketing manager, and I'll be giving the demo later today. Excited to be here for the last, I guess, session for Master API Management Series.
Awesome. All right. Let's get started. As with any of the Salesforce presentations, a quick like a forward-looking statement. We'll talk about new products in these, but please make your purchasing decisions on the products available today. With that, let's get started. So I think some of you have joined for these sessions before. For folks who are joining for the first time, just a quick context around this. We started this API Mastering API Management series back in April. We got really good feedback about this, and what we covered as part of this, like a 5-part series, where initially we started with talking about API gateways, kind of like what are the different gateway offerings we have within MuleSoft, the advantages of each, like the Mule Gateway, Flex Gateway, how do you deploy, value for each one of them, and some more like resources to help you. Then we kind of went and spoke about governing those APIs, right? About applying those best practices. Then in June, we gave you an insight into the developer portal with API Experience Hub, and how you can create personalized API portals. And in early this month, we gave you an overview of the API Manager, which is our centralized control plane, where all of this kind of like comes together. So today, which is the final session of this API management series, we're going to talk about the best practices for API catalog, which is an important element of an overall API lifecycle. So that's what we're going to do. Again, we got some good feedback about this series. Please let us know, how do you see this series, like your feedback, what we could do, what more you want to hear from us, and kind of like, is there anything that you would like us to cover more in this type of sessions? All right. So with that, let's get started. So what I'll do is I'll first do a quick intro of, again, as I always do, about API management, context, universal API management. And then Venkat is going to give you, I'll kind of introduce the cataloging concept. And then Venkat is going to then cover the more around like the products, but also then the best practices for cataloging within the Anypoint platform. And then towards the end, Sue is going to give you a quick demo of the catalog. Okay. So if you've attended our sessions before at Dreamforce, at Trailblazer DXCon Developer Conference, many of this community session, we talk a lot about this concept about API sprawl or API proliferation. And we hear a lot from people like you, developers like you, and like architects like you, part of the IT teams, part of the business teams, supporting business teams, that as you're delivering your own business initiatives, your digital initiatives, you're developing APIs depending upon your requirements. And sometimes the APIs are procured on the cloud. Sometimes those APIs are developed as part of your composing your applications on any point, but also oftentimes outside any point platform. So what we see is that as the APIs are being developed and procured across these different deployments, cloud, on-premise, hybrid cloud, different technologies, deployment patterns, we see that as an industry, we see that the API sprawl or proliferation is actually increasing much more, leading to many challenges like, hey, lack of visibility into the APIs that you have in the first place, right? Again, and with that, how do you even govern and apply best practices to those APIs? Insufficient control and access across these diverse architectures, and then finally, complex operations and troubleshooting. Quick stat from Gartner, which is something that Gartner has been saying since a couple of years now, is more than 50% of APIs are going to go unmanaged by 2025. The biggest challenge with this is it's going to lead to a lot of security vulnerabilities in your IT environment, right? So how do we then help you with API sprawl? And that's at MuleSoft is our vision with universal API management. We came with this vision for folks who are new 2 years back, 2.5 years back now. And the idea behind this one was expanding the scope of API management that you all are aware of or you're familiar with to APIs, any API within your environment, right? Mule APIs as well as non-Mule APIs. And the way we do that is essentially having this set of capabilities across the API lifecycle, allowing you to design and build APIs on the anypoint platform, connected apps, when you're composing applications on the anypoint platform, but also discovering non-Mule APIs and bringing them into one place, governing both the Mule as well as non-Mule APIs, managing and securing any API, Mule as well as non-Mule API, and then most importantly, engaging and scaling on those APIs, right? Essentially sharing those APIs, whether they are Mule or a non-Mule API, within your internal teams as well as your external partners. Now, why is cataloging important for all of this? Because cataloging is basically at the foundation for everything that you deliver, right? So if you think about this, when you design, build, you develop an API on a catalog. When you discover, you build that API in that catalog. You can manage and secure. So again, cataloging becomes important across this entire API lifecycle journey. So when you look at that API lifecycle, at MuleSoft, we provide you now the set of capabilities to help you across your API lifecycle. If you start all the way from the right-hand side bottom, again, designing and building your API, right? Design center to design an API, mock APIs, Anypoint Code Builder, as well as Anypoint Studio to actually implement your API, right? Using the tools, data view tools to now do the data connectivity, transformation, message transformation, orchestration, backend connectivity to build that API, to compose that API. You heard about the 3-tier architecture, creating those system APIs or the process APIs. This is where you can start doing that. But then now when you start moving up, as part of your development lifecycle, API governance to essentially provide you now the best practices to design those APIs, implement those APIs, and then have a regular conformance across those APIs. Exchange as your single, as your catalog for all your APIs, right? Essentially APIs, automations, or integrations as a single source of truth. And then once you deploy, then monitoring to make sure that your APIs are performing the right way. And then API manager to now create those security policies, deploy those policies to the right gateways, and then make sure that the APIs are controlled and managed appropriately. So again, providing a set of capabilities across that entire API lifecycle. Now, when you move to API catalog, right, as I said about Exchange being a single source of truth for all your APIs, integrations, and automations, and essentially your catalog for all your APIs, right? But that works for APIs that are developed on the Anypoint platform. What about the APIs that are outside the Anypoint platform? Oftentimes you see that as APIs are now, from a API sprawl perspective, you want to bring those APIs into one place, you're going to start seeing that all these APIs developed on, say, IBM platform or a cloud platform or a AWS platform. When you're bringing them, you basically have this endless production of APIs. And the advantage of an API catalog is you can actually create an order for those APIs, right? A pipeline for that catalog leads to more of an order in that any point exchange. And now when you look at a basic API catalog, right? Typically what you see is that you can organize that. Now think about this, right? As you bring this 1,000 APIs into one place, how can you organize them, right? A basic API catalog again provides you one or two categories, minimal documentation, manual governance. It doesn't allow you to really scale, right? So as you want to use Gateway to control those APIs, it becomes really difficult for you to scale that. Well, what we provide you is an enhanced API catalog in exchange that allows you now organize this all these different APIs. You can provide multiple categories. You can make sure that you have full documentation for your APIs, and you can now automate. You can create an automated API governance or developer or your pipeline as part of your development pipeline itself. We have actually a lot of customers who have actually done that, right? So essentially, including governance, cataloging, as well as governance as part of the development pipeline itself. Now that's when you start getting the full value of controlling using the platform to control the API sprawl. All right. So what I introduced in the first thing is like UAPI, Universal API Management, API sprawl, how it helps API sprawl, the product set of capabilities, why cataloging is important. And I'm going to hand it over to Venkat to kind of walk you through the products. Venkat, you?
Hey, thanks, Amir. So by now it's probably you all kind of appreciate why there is a need for this API catalog. Let's talk about some specific capabilities in any point that we offer, and then we'll talk about some specific best practices that we suggest as well. So the first thing I wanted to introduce, which is again not new to all of us, is Anypoint Exchange. Exchange is the center or in the center of a lot of the capabilities that Anypoint provides. Exchange, as you know, is a marketplace for all your connectors and assets and like policies and rule sets and fragments and so on. And Exchange allows you to share those APIs, make that a portal for reuse and so on. But what I wanted to focus on today was Exchange as the catalog of APIs, of REST APIs, async APIs, or any HTTP APIs, and so on. Exchange can be this catalog of any API. And if we go to the next slide, it's not just the APIs that you design in Anypoint and implement in Anypoint and manage in Anypoint. You can use this as the catalog for any API, even if that API was built on an external API management solution or implemented somewhere in a cloud platform or on your own on-premises solution. Use API catalog CLI, and we have talked about this in the previous sessions as well. Use API catalog CLI to automatically bring all those APIs from external repositories to build a single catalog, single inventory of all your APIs. API catalog CLI helps you integrate with your API repositories or CI/CD pipelines. That means you can integrate this with Git, for example, and automatically bring those APIs as they are created. And you can configure API catalog CLI to listen to certain branches or triggers and then extract APIs along with the metadata in that repository, along with the documentation in the repository as well. And all those APIs can be cataloged in Anypoint Exchange to create the single inventory. You go to the next slide. So with that, there are, of course, several best practices for, and as I said before, just to reiterate, Exchange is a generic marketplace of multiple types of assets, right? Like APIs and templates and connectors and policies and rule sets and so on. But then, and there are metadata that you can associate with any type of asset. And then there is versioning practices that are available for any type of assets as well. Now, what I wanted to talk about was specifically for APIs, how this metadata matters. And if you go to the next slide, Samir, I'll talk about 3 such best practices, more specifically, because often we all understand API versioning as the first thing that we focus on when it comes to cataloging an API or developing an API. But some of the often overlooked aspects of the cataloging best practices, one of them is documentation. As I said before, one of the foundational reasons why we all build APIs is so that you can make it available for your consumers, be it internal or external consumers, to use and reuse. And documentation becomes one of the primary means that allows or enables others to reuse APIs. So make sure that when you catalog an API, it has the right documentation. And Exchange provides different flexibility to create a different structured documentation. That includes things like have basic detail about what the API does, but at the same time, more specifics about how can users use this API, what sort of authentication does it provide or support, and what SLA tiers, if you have any, does this API support, and so on. And then also provide links to external documentation that you might have or references that you might have that will allow your users to use these APIs more easily, start using these APIs more easily. So this is the first best practice that is very often overlooked as we look at some of the assets in any exchange today. Significant number of these APIs don't have the right documentation. So this is the first one. If you go to the second one, the second thing, again, this is probably another common thing that is straight first thing that comes to our mind when talking about cataloging best practices, asset naming. But we still wanted to reiterate that here, just to make sure that you're following the same consistent naming practices across all your APIs. And this becomes important because, as Samir mentioned, we are in a world where in a large organization, there are teams building APIs from multiple platforms. And especially when you are building APIs not only in MuleSoft, but also elsewhere, and using an API catalog CLI to catalog those external APIs in Exchange, ensuring that the right naming conventions are followed will go a long way in creating a uniform API catalog. So if you go to the next slide, Samir, and third one, and it's probably my favorite in terms of managing and classifying your APIs in the catalog, is the asset category. And this, again, the most overlooked aspect of cataloging an API. Adding categories, I'll talk about tags next, are two key aspects of managing taxonomy for your APIs. And what managing taxonomy allows you to do is allows you to classify APIs in different groups and make sense of these APIs and apply different rules and permissions for these APIs. And so for some of the examples of categories that we recommend are based on what is that API used for? What type of API is it? Is it a system API or a process API? Or maybe it's an API that's exposed to your end users via an experience API, or what type of systems does it access? And more importantly, does this API handle sensitive data? What type of data does this API handle? Managing those categories or adding categories and taxonomy to this API allows you to classify and manage the APIs in the catalog much more easily, rather than managing 1,000 APIs in one go. And quickly following the second part of the taxonomy is tags. Tags helps customers quickly search and find the right type of APIs. That can be very focused on individual teams, where there's a next level taxonomy that individual developers can add to group APIs and make better sense of these APIs. And these tags can often be used across APIs and applications. That way, it helps you group the single set of APIs that are part of a larger application. So with those categories and tags as part of taxonomy, if you go to the next slide, Samir, um, we'll, let's touch upon a little bit about how governance can help you manage these best practices. So we had a previous session about Anypoint API governance, but in a nutshell, API governance is a capability that Anypoint provides that allows you to assess APIs continuously. Specifically, assess APIs that are in your catalog, or assess APIs that you might have built elsewhere, and assess APIs in those CI/CD pipelines, but assess those APIs continuously for best practices, open API standards, or security practices, and of course, and if you are managing the API in Anypoint and using capabilities like API Manager, you can use governance to assess the API end to end, including the policies and other security policies available in API Manager. So governance provides this full assessment of an API and helps developers build consistent and conformant APIs. Now, if you go to the next slide, Samir, actually, before going to this slide, I mean, on governance, maybe I didn't have a slide added here, but one of the things that governance provides is an API cataloging best practice that comes out of the box, because I talked about some of the cataloging best practices like documentation, tags, categories, API names, of course, versioning and other metadata that you should keep in mind. Governance provides out of the box rule sets to govern or to assess API catalog best practices, including tags, categories, and there's a separate rule set for documentation best practice as well. These are ways you can use governance to automate assessment of your API catalog and see if your APIs in the catalog are following best practices. But of course, governance gives you the flexibility to write your own rules. So you don't have to use the rule sets provided by Anypoint, because those are our points of view, but use those rule sets to customize best practices for cataloging and documentation for your organization. So when you get a chance, do check it out. And then the last thing I wanted to call out here is the actionable API insights, which is a new feature that we will add later this year, which focuses on helping you get a better sense of APIs in your catalog. Specifically, in this case, I'm referring to the catalog as API Anypoint Exchange catalog. So this is an out-of-the-box dashboard that will help you without you having to write any rules or assess APIs. Provide an understanding of what type of APIs you have, how many have the right categories, and slice and dice those APIs by categories or tags, and focus on understanding what APIs you have, and more importantly, help you take actions to improve posture of those APIs. For example, how many of the APIs in the catalog are missing simple plain documentation? Now, of course, you can customize that with governance to check for more sophisticated documentation best practices specific to your organization. But Insights will provide you an out-of-the-box metric and guidelines on helping you identify which are the APIs that don't have documentation, or which are the APIs that don't have the right categories or tags, and so on. So Insights will help you understand those APIs and get started with following the catalog best practices, and you can take it further with governance best practices. So that's all I had with some of these capabilities in Anypoint with Exchange, governance, and API catalog CLI. So with that, I'll hand it over to Samir and Sue to walk us through a demo.
Thanks, Venkat. So do you want to, next, I think what we're going to do is we're going to show you like a quick demo on the cataloging feature. So kind of like what we went through. So you're going to do a quick demo for that.
Yep.
So on to you.
I think you have to stop sharing. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. So So as we talked about, this is Anypoint Exchange. This is where you can, it becomes that central repository of all your assets, whether it's APIs or connectors, rule sets. Basically, anything that is considered an asset in Anypoint platform lives in Exchange. And as you can see, you can filter out by different categories, or tags, or even lifecycle state. And if you have multiple business groups, then you can also filter out by that, as well as the different types of assets that you have. And for each API you could go into Exchange and update them yourself manually, or and then also set up documentation, or update the names or who the contact is. But another way that you could update this with your CI/CD pipeline is using Anypoint API Catalog CLI. And that CLI can be used in any IDE. So so this is especially crucial if you're building out APIs that are outside of MuleSoft. So let's say you have specifications and applications that you do want to catalog in Anypoint platform, but you didn't do it in the traditional way of whether starting out with Anypoint Code Builder or Design Center. You could still have, let's say, a GitHub repository with multiple API specs. So I have one for customer API, catalog API, vendor, and shipping. And what API Catalog CLI allows you to do is be able to look through this entire folder that I have, and then it will go ahead and create a YAML file that has the list of all the metadata that it pulls out for each of the APIs. But what's really neat about Catalog CLI is that you can actually update this descriptor file or the file of metadata so that you can put in trigger conditions, version strategy, like it says here. So, and be able to just uh, automate the minor or major increases of your versions, put in what contact you want, as well as specify the tags and catalogs so that when you are using your CI/CD pipeline, you're ready to share this API. All of this is done for you. So you don't have to go manually into each API in Exchange and update it. But as you upload your API specification, it will go ahead and put all of this information into the API catalog. What's also neat is that you can also specify if you have a markdown file of documentation like the one for shipping. You can even specify that and that will get uploaded. So for example, I have a markdown file here of this documentation. And once this is uploaded, you'll be able to see it in Exchange. So, how you publish, one is you could use your terminal to publish your APIs, but another way you can do it is set up a CI/CD pipeline, as I mentioned. So it could be Jenkins, GitHub Actions, or whatever else that you might use. You could just set it up where you have the command publish asset, specifying what file to use. So in my case, descriptor YAML, and then you just have to specify your org ID, username, and password. You could also use client ID and client secret to do so. And then another neat thing you can do is, as Venkat mentioned, we have governance that allows you to check for different governance rules, such as for catalog, or it could be best practices for open API. So you could even set up a workflow. So I split it up here just for demo purposes, but you could also have it in one workflow. But basically, you can validate the API as it's being uploaded to Exchange, make sure that it's all good to go and it meets the recommended best practices that your organization has set. So to update this, all you have to do is just commit, since I'm using GitHub workflow. So, and then once it gets uploaded, it will kick off the GitHub actions. For the sake of time, before our session, I've already ran some workflow to show you what it looks like. So this is where you can basically check for the outputs to make sure that it got published properly. So then, as you can see, like API was successfully published, and then it tells you, what the asset was and what version, and you can you even have link. Oh, sorry, it's hidden the group ID, but it'll tell you like what the URL will be, and you can see that. And then for governance, you can see just an output of different warnings or um, violations. So here's the validation report, and then it tells you that it doesn't conform to OpenAPI best practices and what are the validations and what the message is. So this one needs a lower hyphen case string for the operation ID. So it just kind of gives you an output of how you can improve your API spec to meet the best practice requirements of your organization. So in exchange, what I've done is these 5 APIs that we've uploaded have the tag of catalog. So now I can filter it out by tag. So now I know that these were the ones that I uploaded. And then for each of the APIs, you'll be able to see this conformant button. And it's because I've already, or our security team or your governance team set up a governance profile that allows you to specify what APIs need to get governed and then what kind of rule sets we need to apply to it. But as you can see, we have that documentation that we've created in our IDE, as well as see all the specifications. And then in conformance status, we can see that there's 2 rule sets applied: API catalog information and API documentation. So even though it passed, there's some warnings and info. And what's neat is that these rule sets can also be customized. So if there's some of these warnings that you think, oh, it needs to be a violation, it needs to let people know that like this really needs to be fixed, you can even do a custom rule set and change out the level of violations or warnings. So as you can see, it doesn't use semantic versioning, and we don't have data sensitivity in the catalog. So it just gives you an idea of what are some things that you could do to improve your cataloging as well as documentation. So this one doesn't have an API notebook or an FAQ page. So how you can set this governance up is you go to any point API governance, and you can create a new profile. I've already created one here with the API catalog and documentation best practices, and you can see all the APIs that are specified. And the reason why you only see 5 is because I filtered out this profile to only pull up tags, or the ones that have tags of catalog. You can even set up automatic notifications as well as set up the name, and you can edit them. So for each API, you can see, okay, what are the warnings? What are the status? And what's really neat is that if your API is part of multiple profiles, you can also go down into conformance breakdowns and just see more information. And then, yeah, so this will allow you to do that automatic checks on all of your APIs that you want to make sure that it fits the catalog best practices and documentation practices. And And for each of these rule sets, they are documented in any point exchange. So all the out of the box policy or rule sets that the governance team provided is in exchange that you can look up, and you can see what rules are in the rule set and what are the levels of warnings or violations. So that was a quick demo on how, what are some ways that you can put in best practice measures so that your catalog becomes something that is reusable and easily searchable. So now I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then we can answer some questions.
Yes, thank you, Sue, for the demo.
Yep.
I will go in order of the questions we have received. So the first one is from Mariano. Is there any plan to enhance the API catalog for extended to IT to async APIs? So,
I thought API catalog CLI already supports async API.
Yeah.
If that is not the case, I'll probably stand corrected. As far as I know, API catalog CLI already supports it.
okay. Then we have this from John. Can we integrate the API catalog with our CMDB?
Sorry, Rajesh, I sent a link to the documentation as well. Yes,
Sure.
I confirm that event-driven APIs are supported in auto catalog CLI. So the second question was CMDB. Even though I'll let Sue and Samir share that thought. I'm not tried this myself, but the CMDB, like say ServiceNow, you can use custom scripts to call the catalog CLI. That's the usual way to kind of have custom script workflow where you would embed the catalog CLI to publish assets. Hopefully that works. In future, we'll consider ways to have a more native integration with CMDBs. That way, you don't have to have custom scripts. That's something that we have considered, but we don't have that native integration. But today, you can use custom scripts or anything that supports custom scripts. You can embed the published catalog CLI assets.
Sure. Thanks, Pankaj. So we have again a question from Mariana. Any recommendations to use versioning in a CI/CD without depending on version attribute from the spec YAML file?
Versioning in CI/CD. We do recommend that you use versioning in spec. Maybe we can discuss offline as to why you want to ignore that. I would love to understand that a bit more before I answer that question. Maybe you can do that via chat, or if there's another way, happy to do that. But
Yes.
yeah, we do recommend that you use the spec version, the API version in the spec as a way to kind of version your APIs and use that, because that's what your users see as well.
Yes. If you want to give more specific use case, Mariana, you can email us. We should be able to get that answer.
Of course.
Next, we have from Rohan. How do API catalogs help in scaling API usage?
So just, I would say, like, think about it this way, right? One of the ways you want to scale, or maybe the question is more about how you can actually reuse your APIs, right? That's probably what you're asking here, right? And then the idea behind this is, if you want to reuse your API, you want to make sure that the API is appears visible, have the right categories, have the right documentation to help you with so that as your other teams are actually working on that API, using the right tagging, so that when they search for that API, like, hey, I want to do this, or I want to do this, that API actually appears. Once the API appears, then with the categories, that actually helps with now categorizing that API, so it will be easily searchable. But then not only that, right? Once you find the API, the question then also always is like, how can you use this API within your environment, right? Within for your use cases. That's where the documentation helps. That's where that sample code and everything helps, right? So that's kind of like the cataloging is not just about just putting like a tag and a category, but making sure that you use this as part of your overall like a developer process itself.
Yes, thanks so much. So we have next one from Smita. Are there any plans for using Copilot for API management and documentation?
Maybe I can answer. So yeah, I don't know. Are we able to talk about our Copilot initiatives? Yeah, right. We can.
Yeah, I mean,
talk about.
we can definitely talk about it. Some of the things I think are all upcoming, but this is we can definitely.
So maybe at a high level, I'll mention one of the initiatives that we have. We didn't mention this here in this session for various reasons, but we have a separate initiative that's called a Salesforce API catalog. That you will all hear that in a couple of weeks at Dreamforce. Salesforce API catalog is a way for us to bring your APIs that you've built on MuleSoft or built on Salesforce in Copilot. What that allows you to do is Smita, I think you had a question about finding these APIs as well, right? Helps you find the APIs that you want to use. You can use Copilot to say, okay, I want to do these action. Tell me how to do it, and Copilot will use the APIs and the metadata in the APIs. This is where the right taxonomy, having the right metadata and the right documentation helps, because Copilot is only then useful. Right? Copilot will use that metadata to train the models to help you find the right APIs to use, and that's the integration that we are specifically building. Now, your other question about using Copilot to improve documentation. That's something that we have considered. Samir, I don't know if it's part of our MuleSoft roadmap anywhere in the near future. Something that we have considered, and we'll look into it.
Yeah.
For future.
Yeah, but not in the immediate roadmap for sure.
Yeah. But then finding the APIs with the right tags, even if you didn't have the right tags, but just using the metadata and the documentation, that's what we will unlock as part of the Salesforce API catalog.
Thanks, Venkat, for sharing the tidbit. I'm excited to see what's there. Okay, so we have from Archana Devi, API governance rule set has limitation of 10 APIs, right? Question. Is there a limitation on API governance rule set?
No. Sorry, I couldn't see the question, Rajesh. What is the question again?
So it says that only 10 API governance rule set has limitation of 10 APIs.
No. Sorry. Okay. So maybe that number 10 kind of tells me that maybe what you're talking about is by default, every endpoint customer has entitlement to govern up to 10 APIs at no additional cost, right? But you can purchase additional APIs to govern, and that will help you govern unlimited number of APIs, of course. You can use any rule set, any number of rule sets with any number of rules and govern any number of APIs. 10 is just the default that comes with this your Anypoint subscription.
So we have a question from Victor. This is more on the access. API exchange can be accessed by Anypoint users only. Question mark. So every user should be added to the Anypoint.
Every Anypoint users on the.
I don't follow the question.
So maybe I think the question is more about for the one is the public portal and another one is the private portal.
Private portal, yeah.
Right. So I think for the private portal, you need to have a user to access that portal. That's really what the question is. So like for anybody who wants to now have access, they need to have a user, Anypoint user. It has to be an Anypoint user that gets added to your org, and then that's the one that can look at all your APIs.
Yep.
Yes, and Anypoint exchange. I think only Anypoint users can have access to Anypoint exchange.
Yeah.
And one thing I think we should probably also mention, while Anypoint Exchange is in Anypoint Exchange, you can create a public portal. You can add this API into this public portal and change the visibility of this API, and you can control that for every API, so that any external user can access the API. But at the same time, you can also do that with Anypoint Experience Hub, which gives you a lot more flexibility and power to create a more flexible portal with a lot more capabilities. So that's another option for you if you want to expose APIs to external users.
Yeah. I think the follow-up question is, can the APIs be made available per business group? That is, others cannot see APIs for other business groups that are published on public portal. So you're basically asking whether the APIs can be categorized into different business groups and access restricted by business groups.
Yes, you can assign permissions in Exchange, view permissions, or I believe edit permissions as well, if I'm not wrong, by business group. Yes, you can set. Yeah.
True, that is right. Yeah. We have a question from Mariana again. Thank you. I will reach out to you since API catalog versioning strategy is not working as expected and there's no much documentation about it. Okay, yeah, sure. Reach us out through email. We have the online public group contact us form, and then we should be able to get this answer for you. Yeah, I think we have a few questions on the chat as well, so let me bring that up. Okay. Yeah, I think this we have already answered. This is regarding the
we covered that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I don't see any more questions. I think we're good then.
Okay.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining. This is a great session, and we will upload this recording shortly after this meeting. So, any final notes, Samir?
No, I think thanks everybody for attending. Again, please, if you have any other questions, let us know. Let Rajesh know. Definitely looking for your feedback. We will try to actually send out like a survey where we'll capture the feedback from community users about this series, what you liked, would you like to know more, and how can we improve on this. All right. So again, thank you everybody, and do let us know if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.